You're listening to The Fix with Ryan Rothstein, live from the Prop Swap studios of AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Prop swap that ticket and cash in while the odds have improved. Once again, here's Ryan.
All right, it's 10:30, so it's time for your football fix. With NFL Eagles insider John McMullen. Be sure to follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen. He does excellent work for PhillyVoice.com and Sports Illustrated at SI.com. And you can also listen to John every Saturday morning right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio, extending the play 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So let's bring John into the conversation now and talk more of everyone's favorite topic. The lovely Philadelphia Eagles. John, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well. Just enjoying another episode of the soap opera that is the Eagles today.
Yeah, it's never ending. You know, we're all like the housewives, or men if you're a stay-at-home father at home watching the afternoon soap operas, and it's never ending. It is never ending, John. This is the direction I want to go with you tonight, and we've talked about this before, and we touched on last night a little bit about the draft and how the Eagles have gone about developing players and et cetera, et cetera. With the growing noise and complaining, fair or foul, about the Eagles, Doug Peterson now getting louder. Howie Roseman has been getting louder, and it's never really been quiet. Even Jeffrey Lurie complaints and organizational complaints as a whole. And I started off the show with pointing to last year where Doug Peterson gets up at the podium and he says, Mike Groh, I'm paraphrasing, Mike Groh's job, 100% safe. Next day, fired. And you and I have talked a lot about this, but is the structural integrity flawed? Like, is the chain of command and the hierarchy and how they do things behind closed doors, is it flawed?
Yeah, I think it's flawed. I think that's fair to say. But it depends on your definition of flawed, I guess. I mean, it's Jeffrey Lurie's team. Jeffrey Lurie can do what he wants. It's what I wrote on PhillyVoice.com today. That's the obvious part. The not as obvious part is he shouldn't do whatever he wants because he should be smart enough to understand. He's been doing this for over a quarter century. Smart enough to know what he doesn't know, and what he doesn't know is football. And that's not an insult. I mean, there aren't many owners in this league. Probably got to go back to Al Davis, who had a firm understanding of actual methods of building a football team and scheme and X's and O's and how things go on in the locker room. And there's a long history of meddlesome owners in sports, not just the NFL, but all across sports, and it generally doesn't work out well. I mean, it's just the reality. And while Jeffrey does it in a more understated fashion than, say, a George Steinbrenner, he's been meddling a lot over the last 2 years, and that's not a good thing. It's never a good thing.
Now, why is that? Is it just because I grew up on Andy Reid and that era, and I guess it's just as simple as he never had to meddle, right? And now he feels like it's so frustrating, and he knows how the city, just talks, and it's loud in Philadelphia. It's one of the toughest places to play and be a part of a sports team. So is it just that simple, that because of the struggles and the noise in the city, he feels like, well, I'm going to step in. I just can't sit by and let this happen?
Yeah, I think it is that simple. I really do. I talk about social media all the time. It's a hellscape. There's a lot of bad and very little good. And one of the major bad for companies and companies as a whole, not just sports, but even more so in sports because it's so public-facing, the industry as a whole. I mean, Eagles are like everybody else, and they see something on Twitter or they hear something on talk radio, and they just blow it out of proportion to this might, it must relate to all of our fans. You know, a couple of loudmouths on social media, and it's just not true. And the overreaction to it is real, and it's dumb, to be honest. And yeah, I think that's a big part of it from Jeffrey's perspective. And you know, again, excuse me.
You're getting all choked up. I don't blame you.
I got choked.
While John, gets right here. I think that Doug is growing tired of this, John, and I know we've talked about this.
Sorry about that, Ryan.
No, it's fine, John.
I was getting too fired up.
I know you were. Look, we've been doing this for a long time. That's the first time that's ever happened. So
yeah, well, that's never drink something on air and then it goes down the wrong pipe and then you lose it for a second. So
I've been there.
That's a rookie mistake, but
it is. It's okay.
I apologize for that. And I think what I was saying about Jeffrey Lurie is, you know, again, he's the owner of the team, and you have to set an example. You have to be the leader. I mean, so what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean don't show up to Cleveland because you're upset on why the team is playing, on how the team is playing. It means don't leave the practice field if you're upset about something. Look at Jerry Jones. I mean, people in this city hate Jerry Jones, obviously, because he's the owner of the Cowboys. He's a big loudmouth, and he's the big personality. And, you know, he was here when Ben DiNucci was stinking up the joint for his team. That was pretty stinking embarrassing. You don't see him not showing up. In fact, he does the exact opposite. He does his own radio show, constantly talks about it. At least he's showing leadership.
Well, and he's consistent.
What was that?
Sorry to cut you off, but I just said, and he's consistent.
Sure.
You know,
and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, I think it's huge.
I think that's a really big part of it.
So I'm so happy you brought up Jerry Jones because that's where I was going next. I was going to say I'm a little bit fearful that, you know, if Jeffrey Lurie is trying to do the iron fist and I'm the boss and I'm worried and I need to step in, and let's just play worst case scenario for a second, Doug parts ways with the team, vice versa, however it would work out. Is Jeffrey Lurie going to turn into a Jerry Jones, like I want a yes man or I want a certain type of guy that I can like control? Is he going to get paranoid now? Like, I just don't like the perception, and I think there's some reality to it.
Yeah, I don't like the way it's going. I really, and I talked about it a lot when you mentioned Mike Groh at the beginning. I mean, Doug Peterson wanted to keep Mike Groh as his offensive coordinator. Again, not the most popular thing. A lot of people on Twitter wanted Mike Groh gone. So what? So what? I mean,
who cares?
If you're Jeffrey Lurie and you sit back and you're honest with yourself, really, really honest with yourself, and you say, well, Mike Groh can't be the offensive coordinator of this team, but, you know, I can bring in Rich Scangarella. You don't know the difference. You don't know the difference, except you do know your head coach wants Mike Groh. Your head coach that won a Super Bowl championship less than 36 months ago, and at the time you fired Mike Groh, you know, you're 2 years off it. I mean, where's the deference? And forget about the deference. Where's the common sense? Where's the common sense? Say, okay, this guy won a Super Bowl, so I'm going to let him have the coaches he wants. Is that a strange thing to say?
No, it would be, it would be strange if, like, Doug should have the keys to the car, so to speak, if he wants it, and I know you've mentioned, I don't know if he wants it, but I think he does now, and I know you've touched on that. And, we're talking with John McMullen, and John, I went this route because I'm so sick of the Carson Wentz talk. I'm so sick of the blame game, or should we fire Doug, John? Like, I want to go bigger here because I think at this point, this team, and more importantly, the organization is concerning me. So I want to try and get to the bottom of what the heck is really wrong with it and how much worse it can get and, what the future is going to hold.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it can get much worse, and I think it will get much worse if Jeffrey makes bad decisions and fires the head coach. I think it's going to get a lot worse. So, I mean, I go back to the fact that, he's been here for over 25 years now. He understands, or he should understand, that this industry is cyclical. You're going to have up years, you're going to have down years. But he's also, and you mentioned Andy Reid. You grew up on Andy Reid. Okay, did he not learn anything from what went on there? Between Andy Reid, you had this incredible stability. You had the best offensive coach of this generation. You have a slam dunk Hall of Famer for almost 15 years in this city. And by the way, it was over for Andy in Philadelphia. I'm not trying to say they should have kept him because everybody's got a shelf life, even great coaches like that. But what he should have done is what he ultimately did after the Chip Kelly mistake, and that's move forward with a similar pass with a different voice, which he ultimately did with Doug, who was obviously an Andy guy. And it worked. You would think he would have learned from that. But, this team is weird. This organization, is weird. And it comes from the top. It comes from Jeffrey Lurie. They have this obsession with being labeled as innovative. And that's why they hired Chip Kelly. And again, I mean, I always joke, Chip Kelly is the guy with the S8 on his play card. And, Doug is the guy with the 300-page playbook. And Jeffrey thinks Chip was the innovative one. I mean, he buys bells and whistles. He buys con man. He buys snake oil.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And he's doing it, again because you're going to hear names like Lincoln Riley if he fires that. And it's going to be an abject disaster. I'm predicting it right now. It's going to be an abject disaster.
He's like the grandfather, and I don't even know how many of them are out there that would exist with this, but he's like a grandfather that's saying I'm technologically savvy, and he's trying to order his groceries off an app, and it's like, dude, you're great in the grocery store. You don't have to try and do it off the app, man. Like, it's, I don't know what they're trying to prove.
Yeah, but and that's the ironic thing, because I'm not saying he's out of touch or anything like that. I get where you're going with that. It's more of, like, as I said, he wants to stay ahead of the curve. He wants to be the innovative guy. He wants to be the guy who comes up with the next thing. And that's where you hear this, nonsense in the off season about, 2 quarterbacks on the field at one time. That's the future of football. Well, guess what? It ain't the future of football on December in Green Bay against Aaron Rodgers. Because if you try to roll that nonsense out, you're going to get beat by 40 points. And that's where the Eagles are kind of lost. And you go back to this draft, I think there's a perfect example of it. And I was thinking about the draft, Ryan, and I'm thinking, this was a virtual draft, like everything else in this disaster of a year. It was a virtual draft. And what did that mean? That meant the football people, the Andy Weidels of the world, and all the scouts were in different rooms and on Zoom with Howie, and, they're all telling him to take Justin Jefferson, and he's taking Jalen Reagor. They're all telling him to take Jeremy Chin, and we could use a playmaking safety. Oh, no, I want to go 2 quarterbacks. And he's taking Jalen Hurts. We could use a contributor, a linebacker, Howie. I'm going to take the guy who might be a superstar 3 years down the line, or might be out of the league, and there's probably not going to be any in between. I mean, they went so drastically from college production because it didn't work out with JJ, it didn't work out with Donnell Pumphrey, players like that, and then they go just complete 180 to measurables, and this guy's got a great spark score, and Reagor looks more explosive on tape than Jefferson. I mean, it's rare, and it's not hindsight when you say it the day of the draft. So I feel I can say this. You're playing at LSU. You're playing against the highest level of competition in college football, and you're dominating. And you're doing it against the best teams. You're having your best games against the best teams. And you on tape, you look like a plug-and-play guy. You can run routes. Nobody can run routes coming out of college anymore. This kid can run routes. Just take the pick. It's the owner and the general manager are killing this football team. Killing it.
It's comparable to, just listening to you describe it, it's comparable to, for me, Colangelo trading up to take Fultz from 3 to 1. Like, dude, you're just trying to, make it look like you're doing something because to make it look like you know something, and you're actually being an idiot. Keep it simple.
Yeah, I mean, I even think it's worse than that. I'll tell you why. Because, Markelle Fultz was an abject disaster. We can all agree on that, or we all should be able to agree on that. But it's not like if the Sixers would have stayed at 3 or even went to 1 and took Tatum, or, Fultz was going 2 or 3. Everybody in the NBA thought he could play, and there are, mental issues going on there that those are the things you can't really compute. I think a better comparison for him would be Ryan Leaf back in the day. I mean, Ryan Leaf had everything to succeed except mental toughness. But how do you grade that? That's really difficult to grade. From an athletic standpoint, he had everything to be a great quarterback, and he just wasn't because he didn't have the other side of it. And that can always open. If you're a first-round pick in the NFL, I always say this, you're not going to fail because of athleticism. You're not going to fail because you're not good enough from a measurable standpoint. You're going to fail because of the other things, because you don't work hard. You might not have a high football IQ, and you don't work at it, and you don't try to get better. You don't get along with people. You're not accepting of coaching. It's outlier things. Because everybody who's at that level, including a Jalen Reagor, athletically is off the charts. It's just a matter of how off the charts you are. So I it's never that. But I don't know if people saw it because teams tend to after Jefferson had one of his big games. I don't know when it was. He put up the video of the Minnesota War Room, their general manager, Rick Spielman, Mike Zimmer, everybody else who was on there, on the clock, while Philadelphia was on the clock at 21. And they were talking about trading down to get a corner because they just assumed the Eagles were taking Jefferson. They're like, it's over.
Right.
We're going to get one of these corners. We're going to move back. Spielman's telling Zimmer. And, The Eagles took Rager, and they just went nuts. I mean, it's, and I heard, I think it was, Ray Didinger, and I don't know if it's this bad, but he said the Eagles could have got Rager in the second round. That's how bad it was. He wasn't going in the first round. The Eagles tried to spin that. I don't think he was going in the first round. I don't necessarily think they could have got him in the second round, but he wasn't going in the first round if the Eagles didn't take him. I'm very comfortable in saying that. And he also said they could have gotten Hurts in the third round. I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Whose decision was it, John? Sorry to cut you off again. Whose decision was it to get Jalen Rager?
Howie Roseman.
Okay.
In fact, the scouting people wanted Jefferson, and Howie's looking for a particular type of player. And I've explained this before, more of a Tyreek Hill type. You can run on jet sweeps and do some of the horizontal stuff. And he wanted that type of player for the offense. He was looking for a toy. Get the important stuff before you worry about the toys.
Yeah, it's like getting a second car, a red convertible Corvette before you have, before you own a house or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people have kids, the first time, and generally you have whatever kind of car the father likes, and it's usually a sports car, maybe a truck, and they got to come to the realization, you know what? You need a minivan. The kid ain't going to fit in a Corvette. The kid's not going to fit in a Bronco. So you got to be realistic. You got to be you have to be responsible. And everybody kind of goes through that. And the Eagles were irresponsible in this draft, and they have been for a while. Everybody misses. But, and Metcalf's a perfect example, because I never blame them for Metcalf. To me, it's two different conversations.
Yeah, I agree.
It really is.
Yep.
Because everybody was on Jefferson at that point. And as I said, even Minnesota was trading back for a corner because they weren't going to get him. It was an obvious pick. Whereas if you look at Metcalf and where he went in the draft, everybody passed him over almost twice. He wasn't a home run pick. There were a lot of issues with him, and people were wrong, but there were scouts who said, okay, this guy's got tremendous straight line speed, but his change of direction is really, really weak. And generally, that it does not bode well for receivers. So, I mean, that was the thought process of the people who didn't like him. And it was more than one guy. There were a lot of scouts who felt that way. And ultimately they're wrong. So I don't blame the Eagles for that. I blame them for this year's draft. And really those first three picks are just awful picks. And hopefully they turn out. And that's not, I say this all the time, it's not an indictment of the players. Jalen Hurts might turn out to be a great quarterback someday. But I've given you so many reasons why that was a bad pick. Ultimately, and the biggest one is because you want Carson Wentz to succeed. So, in theory, you never want this guy to play.
Right.
Unless you really are thinking about a two-quarterback offense, which is stupid.
It's like, just to add to it real quick, and we only have about 4 or 5 minutes, and I want to ask another question or two if I can squeeze it in, but like both can be true once again. Like you can miss on a pick. Like I always look at the draft as a crapshoot. Like when it comes the time of the year where we're diving into draft prospects and mock drafts and, on previous stations and in my past, I'm like, I just take a big, deep breath out, and I always have said, John, like, it's a crapshoot. Like, what are we doing here? Like, we have to do it, but it's a crapshoot. But it doesn't mean that the organization's strategy or approach isn't flawed. You know, like, they shouldn't have gone that direction, but that's different from, oh, you didn't take DK Metcalf.
Yeah, it's very different, and that's why I always say it's, you know, you're going to miss on picks. You're right, and it's usually about things you can't measure and those intangible things, and people hate that because if you can't measure something, that's why it's not an exact science, and that's why. And everybody misses in this league, everybody, and they do it a lot. But if you hit and your percentage is greater than other teams, that's how you sort of view this thing. And, you know, I'm sure the Eagles are hoping that Davion Taylor develops well, and maybe he does. But short term, I think it's fair to say it looks bad, and particularly the Hurts pick didn't make sense, and the Rager pick didn't make sense. They needed a linebacker, so you can say the Taylor pick made some sense, but if you look at some of the people that were there, they were more ready to play. And that's the issue, because you need a linebacker right now as well as 3-4 years down the line. So it was just a very strange draft, and I think I probably got off on a tangent, and I apologize to you. But, you know, I look at this owner and I look at this GM, and they're the problems. The coach is not the problem.
Yeah, no, and you didn't get off on a tangent. It's exactly the direction that I wanted this to go. One more here for you, John. What needs to change and or what will change realistically in the offseason?
It's a good question. I don't know. We all have to wait and see what Jeffrey Lurie does. We all have to wait and see if he wakes up and, you know, maybe starts reading these things. I know I wrote about him today. I know he's going to read that. I know, I forget somebody else, I think Rob Motti wrote about him today. So more of this is starting to happen. And, you know, people are looking at things, at least to cover this team, similar to me, and the fact that we're saying, okay, you know, you're the owner. Well, just as I said, you're the owner of this football team, and you're not showing up to a road game because you don't like how the team is playing. Again, leadership. Where is the leadership? You're walking off the practice field, and you're talking about developing a culture. You're talking about new normals. I mean, it starts at the top. It starts at the top, and, you know, maybe if that fuel gets added to Twitter, maybe he'll start to notice.
We'll see. It's going to be an interesting final stretch of the regular season for the Philadelphia Eagles and the entire organization. John will have it covered every step of the way. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen, PhillyVoice.com. Go check out his latest there. Sports Illustrated at SI.com. Go check out the latest there, and be sure to tune in to Extending the Play every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. John and I will do a full preview, including John's prediction to the game Eagles-Packers on Sunday. John, I appreciate it, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. Sorry I lost it for a second there.
You got all choked up. It's a heavy topic.
All choked up.
All right, man.
All right, thanks, bud.
Later. There he is, John McMullen.